Welcome back to the next episode of TMT with Mike O'Reilly. My guest, Alex Beller, the co-founder and president of Postscript SMS, a leading platform for commercial SMS texting. Alex, thanks so much for being with me.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Maybe we can start with an easy question. What's your background and what led you to help start and form Postscript?
Sure. So this goes back to 2018. I'd spent most of that decade working in e-commerce in Los Angeles. I was working in one company in particular called Stack Commerce. They ran different e-commerce businesses, different e-commerce operations, and so I grew up more on the what we would call the brand or the retailer side of e-commerce, selling things online. And along the way, I met my now co-founder, Adam Turner, who was also working in that same business, and we became friends, and we became colleagues, and we saw a lot of the trends that today sound pretty obvious, but back then were a little novel, in that email marketing was a huge part of e-commerce businesses back then. And what we saw where we were working is that mobile traffic was going up every year, which means more and more people were shopping on their phones versus the desktop computer, and the performance of email marketing in that business had plateaued a little bit. So it occurred to us, okay, what is going to be the retention marketing channel, or what is going to be email marketing for people's phones? And we had a couple other sources of inspiration too. A friend of ours was asking about text messaging tools, but long story short, we decided to build and launch this business, Postscript, which was going to be an SMS marketing platform for e-commerce businesses built on top of Shopify. And that's what we launched, and that's what we're still doing today.
What are some of the services that you offer to brands and others?
So we really only work on a very specific set of use cases. E-commerce brands, e-commerce retailers, those are the only folks who can use Postscript. And they use our software to do things like build a compliant list of opted-in telephone numbers to market to. And then they also use our software to text those customers, to send really targeted messages for everything from announcing a new product is available to after an order ships, sending a tracking link, to even following up after a purchase and having a back and forth customer support conversation over SMS, over text messaging. Brands and retailers can use our software to do any of those sorts of things. Really, it's aimed at opening up a new revenue channel for them. They use it to make money and to engage with their customers.
And as president, do you find yourself spending more time on the finance and the business management, or is it business development and the technology? Or is it a little bit of both, or a lot of both?
It's a little bit of both. I would say I'm really lucky in the co-founders that I have and also the executive team that we have. A lot of people complement one another's strengths. So in early days, when it was just the three of us, we were doing a bit of everything. But today, I spend the majority of my time working on customer-facing initiatives. So working with prospective customers, working with existing customers, overseeing the teams that sell and service to them. And my partners spend most of their time on the technology side.
So how prevalent is SMS messaging today by companies? How many are we seeing? Is it proliferating quite significantly?
Yes, it's growing very quickly, and it has been for a while. So when we launched the business in 2018, using text messaging, using SMS for brands or for retailers in e-commerce, that was the exception, not the rule. That was a very rare thing back then. And when we launched, what we heard mostly from those sorts of businesses was that they were skeptical of the channel. They thought this might be a little intrusive. Even though they were getting opt-ins, they were just nervous because it hadn't been done much before. Today, 7 or so years later, that's completely changed. Now, SMS and text messaging is a mainstream marketing and engagement channel for brands and retailers. It's enormously popular, it's very common, and what we see is that actually for many brands, not for all, but for many brands, the revenue that they see from SMS has surpassed what they see from email, which they've been working on email marketing for decades, so that's a big deal.
And maybe a compliment to your point, people like to complain about, I get text or I didn't, commercial texting or whatever. But does it work? Is it effective? To your point, it's actually exceeding email traffic and email campaigns.
It's highly effective. It's highly effective both for driving revenue and for keeping prospective shoppers or customers engaged and happy, satisfying them if they have issues, going back and forth and having support experiences over the channel. So it's really performant from both sides. And I think what that comes down to is the fact that all the marketing is opt-in. So even though consumers may feel like, ooh, I'm receiving a lot of text messages, these are all texts that they're signing up for. And normally they're signing up because they want to hear what's coming from this company. They want to understand what the new releases are. They want to maybe get access to a discount code or a sale announcement. They're getting value from the channel. And so in general, we don't see very high unsubscribe rates. We see people retain and stay active and engaged on the channels they sign up for.
So maybe walk me through the process by which a client, a company, a brand, maybe Feastables I know you work with,
Sure.
a couple others. What do they come to you with a campaign already kind of cooked, or do they partner with you to shape what that should look like?
So the Postscript platform is really a self-serve platform. So our customers log into Postscript. They have lots of controls at their fingertips, and they can create and send the text message marketing campaigns and automation flows that they want to using our software. That being said, we're there to support them if they have questions. We also do a ton of research and a ton of analysis into what works really well within the industry, and we try to supply them with best practices and research reports and things like that. But in general, it's more of a self-serve platform where folks can come to us to understand general best practices, but when it comes to creating and sending the text, they're using our software to do that with not much interference from us.
And I expect I know the answer to this, but are you able to provide data to a client, to a brand,
Yes.
on all the different points, whether it's in terms of delivery, adoption, activity, all the different components that they may seem as relevant for, that may not be available in other type of marketing efforts?
It's a great question. So data is a pillar of what we do. Our customers tend to be very data driven, very analytical. These are digital marketers, right? They're people who are marketing on the internet, so they're used to getting feedback and data around what are click-through rates looking like and what are purchase rates looking like. It's more connected and trackable than, for example, if you put up a billboard. That's a little bit more abstract as to what the impact is. And so with us, the standard of data is high, and so we put a lot of effort into building and supplying a pretty rich data insight layer and profile of the efficacy of the channel. So customers can see, for the campaigns and automations that they're sending out, how effective they are, how much money they're making, how many orders are coming through, what the click-through rates are, what unsubscribes look like, so they can use that data to then fine-tune their strategy.
So return on investment, are you finding, is there a category that's strongest? So you mentioned this early on, is it building the lists that's most important? Is it brand awareness, or is it actually conducting commerce?
It's a great question. It varies a little bit based on the goals of each brand or retailer, but generally speaking, there's a few key things. The first is building a large compliant list. We see the health of the revenue channel for each brand really dependent on how fast they're growing their list. Brands can use and marketers can use a whole bunch of proprietary tools that Postscript offers to build a compliant list very easily, using their own traffic and gathering opt-ins, and so that's a huge part of what we do. But the other huge pillar is facilitating actual messaging going out, whether that's messaging aimed at announcing new products which drive revenue, or whether it's setting up what we would call a conversational flow to engage a subscriber and get their feedback or make sure they're satisfied after purchase.
So let's turn to the policy side of the equation.
Let's do it.
It's my understanding, and my working with a number of different companies and brands, that they do their darndest to stay in compliance with all the different regs that are required, and the statute of Telephone Consumer Protection Act, TCPA. How does Postscript handle TCPA compliance, or does it for purposes of the brands and their obligations?
Yeah, so it's always an evolving landscape within TCPA and the regulatory space right now. So Postscript's approach is, first of all, like I mentioned earlier, we really only support a specific set of use cases. And because those use cases are relatively defined, right, it's what e-commerce and retail businesses would use SMS for. Because of that, we take what I would call an opinionated approach to doing our best to ensure that brands are staying within the guidelines of generating compliant opt-ins and the TCPA. And so if a brand is using Postscript, then that means they're using Postscript's, if they're using Postscript's opt-in tools, then we are going to, the opt-in tools we provide aren't totally open. A marketer can't do whatever they want with them. There's predefined guardrails that are going to ensure that the opt-ins they're capturing through our platform are going to be compliant. So we take a relatively opinionated approach.
So TCPA has generated, in my opinion, a cottage industry of legal challenges. Yes. and all kinds of different problems for brands to try and stay compliant. Mm-hmm. Do you provide assistance to companies on TCPA or that use your platform?
So the short answer is yes, and I would say the cottage industry is alive and well. It's very alive and well. It's an interesting thing because I think that what we've seen with TCPA and also all the state level regulations is that the intention behind a lot of these laws is good. It's to protect consumers. It's ideally to stop spam. But with the private right of action kind of strategy that's been set up, it can lead to huge industries or huge collections of attorneys who are focused on filing these suits, looking to profit. And what we find is that many of our customers who are doing completely compliant SMS marketing get targeted. And they get targeted, I think, because they're real businesses that have assets that are worth pursuing and suing. And so we take a very hands-on approach to trying to support our customers when they get into those situations. We view a lot of that action as quite frivolous. And so we've developed a little bit of a strategy and an approach where when we see a new type of claim or lawsuit come in, we will get into the weeds and we will get hands-on and we will build a strategy we believe can be replicated when that same sort of claim goes to a different brand. And over time, we develop the strategy for defense and then we streamline how to resource it so that, for example, in Florida, if a brand receives a claim, they can work with us to essentially fight back, ideally avoid paying any settlement whatsoever, and the whole thing costs them, on the order of $5,000, as opposed to if they were to go it alone and try to navigate the legal space, they'd probably be spending $50,000. So we're really trying to build playbooks that are replicable when we see a new claim use case come up.
So one of the tenets of TCPA is, express written consent from the consumer. Wonderful opportunity so they know what they're getting into. But there's been this belief that the consumers maybe shouldn't have that ability, that's something they shouldn't be able to opt into something, for things like the quiet hour period that the FCC has and that I spent a lot of time on when I was there, that the government, in some regards, seems to know better than the consumers. Is that, where do you see, how does the opt-in of your list building help protect consumers versus the need for government to mandate that consumers can't do something that they ought to be able to?
Yeah, we believe pretty strongly that consumers should be able to opt in, and if they expressly opt in, then they should be able to receive messaging from that business, brand, entity, whatever, on relatively open terms. And the reason we believe that is because the consumer is expressly opting in. They can opt out at any point. They didn't, end up on this list in a fashion that might come off like cold telemarketing. They opted in, not in all, but in many cases, they even sent the first message. And so in circumstances like that, we believe that the proper guidelines should be that overcomes any sort of local or federal guidelines.
Well, and fair disclosure, I've worked on this issue. There's a petition at the FCC to clarify. Doesn't need to correct because the FCC already has declared, in one time or another that the consumer does have that right, and we shouldn't supersede it here. Where do you stand on that petition? I suspect you're probably in favor, given your comments.
Yes, we are in favor of that petition. And like I said, we believe that a lot of the intention behind this sort of guidelines and regulation is consumer friendly. It's just, in reality, a lot of where the rubber meets the road on this sort of regulation ends up being anti-consumer and anti-business and how they get rolled out.
Let's switch the gears to talk a little bit about the states, where they become more aggressive and building what I would consider as mini TCPAs,
Yes.
and also copying and going in their own direction under different authorities. How does a company as yourself, how does the platform handle states having different definitions, different approaches, and where does it stand on type of state action?
So it's tricky. We pay very close attention. Both inside of Postscript, and the EIA also pays very close attention to what's happening at the local state level across the country with the mini TCPA, as you said. And we really see, I would say, a mixed bag in terms of, are the local regulations that are getting rolled out being done with care in ways that make sense for industry use cases, or are they at odds? We've had really positive partnerships and with local state legislatures and regulators, helping them shape laws so that they protect consumers without getting in the way of business or without getting in the way of consumers actually signing up with explicit content. But we've also had instances, for example, in Oregon, where a law gets created and passed that we believe is, anti-business, anti-consumer, and really goes at odds with what we talked about with creating room for express consent to overrule or to bypass government regulation.
Are you finding that states are enacting conflicting, I'll call them protections for now purposes, compared to other states that are doing the same thing? So you have them kind of fighting themselves?
Definitely. And it's also, the reality is that it's quite complicated to do this perfectly with regulation, I think, in particular. I'm excited about what's possible on the technology side, but for example, area codes and quiet hours. This is a common thing where a lawmaker or a legislature will want to pass a mini TCPA aimed at setting up quiet hours for people that live in their state that are maybe more restrictive than the federal quiet hours. Well, the issue with that is who is in that state at any given time, who actually resides in that state. I believe how the regulation works between the carriers is that they don't pass that sort of information back to providers like us. And so for an e-commerce brand using Postscript, let's say they have a list of 50,000 people within this with Oregon area codes that they want to send text messages to, they don't know if those people are actually in Oregon, if they're living in Oregon anymore, because people move around with area codes. I, for example, have an Arizona area code still, right? So what we see in reality is that these things are quite tricky to create and write laws around that deliver the actual intended outcome.
So one of the more recent statutory burdens that have been enacted came from the state of Texas. What has been Postscript experience with that? I guess it's SB 140.
SB 140.
I believe you did a video on this and to help educate.
Yeah.
What was your company's approach to SB 140, and then how's it gone since then?
So SB 140 was very recently. This was a really interesting series of events where the state of Texas passed a mini TCPA, and again, reading it, I believed that it had a lot of positive intention behind it to protect consumers, but the reality is that it was written in a way that was extremely onerous for business to operate within, and there was all kinds of issues with it. So for example, it required repeated disclosures in every single text message that was going out, even to people who'd explicitly opted in, that was going to dramatically increase the cost and dilute the economics of engaging with residents of the state of Texas. Or another example, it encouraged entities that were going to be telemarketing in Texas without really defining exactly what that is, or to register with the state of Texas. And it said that you can't do marketing until you're approved. Well, they had a multi-month backlog. So businesses were confused about if they qualified for SB 140, registering kind of out of fear because there was some advice in the ecosystem that you should register, even though Postscript took the stance that you definitely shouldn't. And so then they were caught in this situation where many customers, many e-commerce businesses, I should say, who see probably 10% of their customer base in Texas, were in this really tricky situation of they'd signed up, they were supposedly not allowed to market until they were approved, but Texas was going to take months and months and months to approve them. There was bonding issues. There was all kind of issues with this legislation. And so we took the approach that we really believed that prior written consent and explicit opt-ins were not intended to be covered in SB 140, but that how SB 140 was written left things a little ambiguous. And so we partnered with the E-commerce Innovation Alliance. We also partnered with a few of our customers that reside in Texas, and we filed a lawsuit to challenge the state. And it was really successful. Quickly, the Attorney General's office reviewed the situation, and they agreed with us that though the law was written a little ambiguously, it was not intended to cover businesses that were operating marketing programs with explicit opt-in.
So they acknowledged that they had crafted a fairly loose standard statute and captured more than they wanted to, and so you were able to succeed in both the court proceedings that you didn't have to litigate out.
Yep.
That's pretty impressive.
It was a really good win for the industry.
So what's the effectiveness of TCPA on, I'll call them bad actors? You know, you described your process. Obviously, not everyone has such a structure, and there are those that take advantage of consumers, you know, to try and scam. Lots of different things that go along. But does the current enforcement structure that we have in place, does it deter any of that, both domestically or foreign?
Well, I would say, you know, look at your phone, right? Look at the amount of spam messages that we probably all receive and the amount of spam calls that we all receive. I think that the TCPA, though really well intended, has just created some funky incentives where for, you know, attorneys pursuing the private right of action opportunity, I think they are incentivized to go after real big substantial businesses, not, you know, maybe fly by night under the radar bad actors. And so you end up with these frivolous suits going against real businesses that are operating opt-in marketing programs instead of effectively policing the bad actors that are out there. And so while I think regulation and especially the TCPA has its place, I think clearly the last decade has showed us that we need a technology solution here.
Well, maybe I guess my next question. So the FCC, and I spent considerable amount of time on the voice side of the equation, moving to technology on stir or shaken. Is there a mechanism that would be helpful on the commercial SMS messaging approach, and how far are we away, or is that already? Are you describing your platform? If everyone were to have similar structure, we could really you know, reduce any kind of criminal behavior.
I'm not totally sure because really I know Postscript's use cases so well, and in order to send a text message on Postscript, you need to be a legitimate business that's operating a compliant opt-in marketing program. So I view our traffic as extremely clean, and I'm really not sure of like all the potential ins and outs that other platforms offer.
But is there a technology solution that we could apply, like a stir shaken for commercial texting?
Well, yeah, I believe there are tech solutions, especially with all the innovation happening in and around AI right now. There just clearly can be levers, whether it's at the, you know, provider layer, which I would consider us provider, the SaaS layer, whether it's the aggregator layer, whether it's at the carrier layer, or some combination. There clearly can, and I hope soon are better tech solutions.
Last question. You've been very generous with your time. Look out in 5 years, what does the SMS marketing industry look like in comparison to traditional marketing approaches?
Sure. I think that SMS is going to continue to grow. I think that other marketing channels or other messaging channels, I should say, like RCS or maybe, you know, Apple Business Chat, other things may develop, but and become a bigger and bigger part of that messaging pie, but I believe it's going to continue to grow quickly. And the reason is because I think it's fundamentally a better consumer experience for marketing to be occurring on a two-way channel. Historically, whether it's through billboards or advertisements or whatever, email marketing, that's one way, that's a push sort of channel. And I think it's better for both the advertiser and the consumer if it's two-way, because that allows for unsubscribes, it allows for feedback, and I think that'll keep the overall health of the channel really high.
I said last question, but you made me think of something. Do you see, and you described maybe potentially the pie getting bigger, but is it likely to, I don't want to say in a pejorative sense, but steal market share from other traditional approaches? Is that a fair to be seen? I
think that's definitely true. I think that every marketing channel has its own place and its own purpose. For example, many of our customers, they advertise heavily on Facebook in order to generate new buyers. They use their SMS program to remarket their existing customers to come back and buy again. And so I think that you would consider SMS or messaging a little bit more of a retention channel than an acquisition channel, but I expect SMS to continue to steal market share, continue to steal dollars, because it's so effective and because it's still so early that the lists that businesses are using are still quite small compared to their email assets. And so I expect that over time it'll catch up and spend will continue to increase and volume will continue to increase as well.
In 5 years, are you still at Postscript?
I hope so.
I can't thank you enough. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Much appreciated.